This is CBN Newswatch.
And thanks for joining us for CBN Newswatch. I'm Heather Sells. The Supreme Court is backing President Trump's attempt to reduce the influx of migrant families coming to the United States. Its new ruling came out late yesterday. Senior international reporter George Thomas has the details of the court's decision. George.
Heather, the court said it would, for now, allow the enforcement of a controversial measure that stops most Central American migrants from seeking an asylum here in the U.S. The administration's goal is to deny asylum status to anyone who passes through another country, like, for example, Mexico, on their way to the U.S. without seeking protection in Mexico first. 7 of the 9 Supreme Court justices agreed with the White House rule. By the way, 2 liberal justices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor, dissented. Big United States Supreme Court win for the border on asylum, President Trump tweeted. The policy targets tens of thousands of Central Americans who cross Mexico every month to try to enter our nation. By the way, it also affects the thousands of people on waiting lists at border crossings in Mexico to claim asylum. Under the new rules, people from Africa, Asia, and South America who regularly arrive at the southern border will also be impacted. The justice's order temporarily reverses a lower court ruling that had blocked the new asylum policy. According to the latest figures from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency, nearly 820,000 people have been detained on the southern border to date. Nearly 600,000 of them were from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. A U.S. Justice Department spokesman said the decision would help, quote, bring order to the crisis at the southern border, close loopholes in our immigration system, and discourage frivolous claims. Meanwhile, Trump administration officials are expected to meet soon, Heather, to discuss whether they should have further restrictions on the number of refugees that are accepted into the U.S. Some officials in the administration are arguing that the number of refugees accepted in the U.S. each year should be reduced from 15,000 or fewer down from the current cap of 30,000. Heather.
That's a lot going on, George. Thank you so much. Well, Jenny Yang is the Vice President of Advocacy and Policy with the humanitarian organization World Relief. She joins us now with more. Jenny, as George Thomas was just reporting, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol has detained more than 800,000 people on our southern border. So how does this Supreme Court ruling really affect these people?
Well, the Supreme Court ruling, it's important to remember, doesn't determine the legality of the final rule on asylum. What it does do is say that while the litigation is taking place, that the rule can actually go into effect. We think that if the rule, and as the rule goes into effect, that it's going to affect thousands of individuals who have a legitimate claim to seek asylum in the United States of America and have a well-founded fear of persecution. We know of individuals that have been traveling through Central America and through Mexico to arrive to the United States, are legally awaiting the ability to state their claim for asylum in the United States. And no matter how meritorious their claim is or how substantive their story of persecution is, what this rule effectively does is entirely eliminates the ability for them to actually seek asylum in the United States of America because they didn't seek asylum somewhere else first. We think that this rule will actually effectively not have individuals who do have a legitimate claim from being able to seek the protection of the United States of America, which could mean that thousands of these individuals, as you were saying, who are waiting to state their claim will effectively be denied from gaining the protection of the United States.
Jenny, I'm wondering if this ruling effectively does stop a lot of migrants from pursuing U.S. asylum. Might that help to clear out our clogged immigration courts?
It's true that we do have a backlog of many individuals who are waiting to get their asylum cases heard in immigration court, but this rule would not necessarily deter those individuals from trying to come into the United States in the first place. So many of these individuals, I think what we're effectively seeing is the narrowing of a window for these individuals to gain protection in the United States. Many of these individuals will probably end up stuck in Mexico or maybe some places in Central America. But what we know about what's happening in Mexico and many parts of Central America is that first, they don't have the resources and the infrastructure to process many of these asylum claims, whereas in the United States, we have a larger capacity to do so. But secondly, what we also know is that in Mexico, specifically, many of these individuals that are seeking protection do not feel safe in Mexico. In fact, many of them are targeted We personally know at World Relief of a Cuban pastor, in Mexico who was ministering to Cuban asylum seekers. And when he was doing that, he was specifically targeted by the cartels in that area for doing this kind of ministry. And so he felt unsafe, and the asylum seekers also felt unsafe. And so
it's really sad to hear that. I want to ask you too, the Supreme Court ruling is just temporary. A legal challenge to the Trump policy continues. When might that be decided, and any thoughts on how it might go?
Well, we're not sure when the ruling will actually happen. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is actually taking up this case right now, so it could be months. And during this time, this rule will actually be in effect. And so I think the end result on a humanitarian basis is that we're effectively closing the door for asylum seekers who are arriving by foot to come into the United States. And we're going to see probably a huge decline in those numbers being able to claim asylum in the U.S.
Wow. All right. Jenny Yang with World Relief, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
The top 10 Democratic presidential candidates are preparing for their big debate tonight in Houston. It is the first time that they will face off on the same stage. Joe Biden remains the front runner for now, and tonight all eyes will be on him and his top two opponents, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. The candidates say while they'll compete against each other tonight, they're all unified with the same goal to beat President Trump in 2020.
I think that we start with a plan, and then we get out there and fight for it. To me, that's what being president is all about.
That debate will be held at Texas Southern University and will be televised on ABC at 8:00 p.m. Eastern. If you go to the debate story on our website, you can watch our Washington, D.C. reporters live chat during the event. And we will have more on these stories and others this evening on Faith Nation. You can watch it here on the CBN News Channel. Well, in other news, there is a new crackdown on vaping. The White House is taking action to ban flavored e-cigarettes. Jenna Browder has more on the dangers behind the smoking trend.
The Trump administration is finalizing plans to ban e-cigarettes that are candy and fruit flavored, responding to a recent surge in underage vaping.
Vaping has become a very big business.
With the First Lady by his side, the president made the announcement Wednesday in the Oval Office.
We can't allow people to get sick, and we can't have our youth be so affected. And I'm hearing it, and that's how the First Lady got involved.
The move comes as the CDC investigates hundreds of lung-related illnesses thought to be caused by e-cigarettes. And data shows more than 1 in 4 high school students use e-cigarettes, the majority choosing fruit menthol or mint flavors. At least 6 people have now died.
Data just shows the kids are getting access to these products in spite of our best efforts. So we simply have to remove these attractive flavored products from the marketplace.
Parents, teachers, and health advocates have increasingly called for a crackdown on e-cigarettes, arguing they're overwhelmingly to blame for the explosion in underage vaping by teens. Federal health officials have called the vaping trend an epidemic, and they worry teens who vape will eventually start smoking. E-cigarette company Juul says it will comply with any new policy. It argues that its products are meant to wean adult smokers off of regular cigarettes. But this proposed ban casts major uncertainty on that claim. And right now, there's virtually no research on the long-term effects of vaping, so no one knows what the impact could be on a user's health. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Turning overseas, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is denying lying to Queen Elizabeth II about his reasons for suspending Parliament just weeks before the country is due to leave the European Union. His comment came after a Scottish court ruled yesterday that his decision was an unlawful attempt to avoid democratic scrutiny. Johnson said the government will appeal the decision, adding that there is still plenty of time for lawmakers to debate the departure.
We're working very hard. I've been around the European capitals talking to our friends. I think we can see the rough area of a landing space, of how you could do it. It will be tough. It will be hard. But I think we can get there. And the crucial thing is, if we can't get a deal, and I really hope we can, if we can't, then we will be ready to come out on October the 31st, deal or no deal. And that's what this is all about.
Turning to Israel now, the Israeli military said today that its jets struck targets in the Gaza Strip following rockets being launched into Israel. Video shot just before midnight last night shows explosions illuminating the night sky. The strikes on Hamas military positions were a response to 2 rockets launched from the Gaza Strip into Israel. The rocket fire interrupted a campaign rally where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking. The army said it intercepted both rockets. Despite conflict in the Middle East, new data shows a spike in Jewish settlement in East Jerusalem. The Israeli settlement watchdog Peace Now collected the data and says the numbers show an increase since President Trump took office in 2017. The group found that in the first 2 years of Trump's presidency, authorities approved over 1,800 housing units in East Jerusalem settlements, which is more than 60% than in 2015. The numbers also show that while Palestinians make up more than half of the population, they've received only 30% of the building permits issued. Palestinians' rights groups say this is due to Trump's support for Israel's nationalist government. Coming up, what happens to doctors who allow infants to die after surviving an abortion. We'll have the latest on what lawmakers in D.C. have to say about that. But first, here's a look at what's trending on CBNNews.com.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
It has the power to influence weight loss, boost your immune system, and improve brain function.
We've seen an explosion of data on the role of the gut microbiome in health.
The free Build a Better Gut booklet reveals the latest information about the gut microbiome. You'll discover how your gut affects the rest of your health.
The gut microbiome has been linked to depression and cancer and heart disease.
Learn how to build a stronger, healthier gut.
The microbiome, if it's in good composition, are really protecting us all the time from more invasive things.
Get the Build a Better Gut booklet, free from the Christian Broadcasting Network. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut.
You need to make sure that your microbes are working with you, not against you.
And if you order online, you'll get immediate access to the Build a Better Gut series, a digital copy of the booklet, and related bonus material. Build a Better Gut today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut for your free copy.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us Regent.
Pro-life Republican leaders in the House held their own hearing Tuesday to make the case for a bill that would protect babies who survive abortions. This after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi denied them the use of a regular committee hearing room. The Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act requires health care providers to exercise the same degree of care to a baby should it survive an abortion as they would any other baby born alive. The bill requires them to transport the baby to the hospital or face possible criminal charges. It also requires the mandatory reporting of those who violate the law. The Daily Signal reports House Democrats have blocked Republicans 80 times from setting up a vote on the bill. Minority Whip Steve Scalise and Representative Ann Wagner have tried to force a floor vote on the legislation using what's called a discharge petition. The petition requires 218 signatures from House members to bring the bill back to the floor for a vote. And joining us now with more on this is Jenna Ellis, a constitutional attorney who has been following this. Jenna, we have already have a law that does define infants born alive after an attempted abortion as a legal person. Explain how this bill is adding to that and why you support it.
Yeah, this is a really significant bill because as what came out in the testimony on Tuesday is that a lot of doctors and abortionists are not actually following that law. And so while that law was passed in 2002 and signed by President George W. Bush, that gave legal status as persons all infants that are born alive, the testimony came out that at least one hospital and other abortionists around the country are actually leaving infants to die after they're born alive and not actually exercising the same standard of medical care as any other person who is alive. And so this bill would create criminal penalties for doctors who essentially are derelict and they're not exercising that standard of medical care simply because the child is unwanted. And this is partial birth abortion. And so this is for doctors who are saying, we see that this child is born alive and yet we are going to just leave it to die. This is horrendous. This is infanticide. And the fact that Democrats are not taking this responsibly and aren't affording the same standards of protections to children and infants that are born alive as any other person is simply shocking for the conscience.
It's hard to imagine that scene, taking place where a doctor wouldn't take care of a child. Did they talk about in the hearing how often this is happening?
They did, and there was at least one instance of a so-called comfort room that was discussed where doctors routinely would simply bring infants to this so-called comfort room who were alive and simply leave them to die however long that process took. And so this is happening all around the country. Of course, this is happening with abortionists just again, throughout the country, and that came out very clearly on the testimony on Tuesday. And so this legislation is definitely needed to provide not only mandatory reporting, but criminal penalties, as well as the mandate that any babies that are born alive would be transported to a hospital where doctors, rather than abortionists, who are actually upholding their Hippocratic oath and want to exercise that reasonable medical care, would be able to give that child that standard of care that you and I would expect if we were going to a doctor and needed life-saving medical care.
Of course, we're just about out of time, but do you see any chance of Steve Scalise taking this to a vote in the House? And do you think this conversation might come up tonight at the Democratic debate?
I don't see this coming up at the Democratic debate, unfortunately. I mean, they're focused on ridiculous things like climate change and other things that really don't matter to the American vote. But hopefully Steve Scalise will reach that number threshold on the petition to force this vote, and then we will see just exactly how the Democrats are just ignoring the life issue. But I hope that this will, Heather, come out in the general election debate, because President Trump has been so supportive of pro-life, defunding Planned Parenthood to the extent of his capacity as president. So I think that this will become a national conversation once we get into the general election.
All right, Jenna Ellis-Reeves, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Heather.
And after the break, the lasting impacts of September 11th terror attacks and how one couple found new life at Ground Zero.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com. Want to be a part of a community that inspires your spiritual growth while winning prizes? The all-new MyCBN app. Connect with the community for prayer and encouragement. Track and set spiritual goals. Enjoy conversation starters with friends and family, and collect points to win prizes. The all-new MyCBN app, a great place to belong. Download the app at cbn.com/mobile. Grow, connect, have fun. The all-new MyCBN app.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs, from health to entertainment, you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Check your local listings or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel. Now available at cbnradio.com.
18 years ago yesterday, a beautiful Tuesday morning turned deadly. Islamic terrorists rammed jets into the Twin Towers in the Pentagon, killing more than 3,000 people. Many people turned to God on that devastating day. Paul Strand introduces us to one couple that found new life at Ground Zero.
Outside this apartment building near the Twin Towers, Christina Stanton told how her husband Brian, high up on the 24th floor, shook her awake that 9/11 morning.
He said a bomb went off in the World Trade Center. So we rushed onto our terrace, and we were just in shock.
Then the second plane roared past them to hit the second tower.
The shock waves from the plane blasting into that building actually blew us back into our apartment.
They rushed out of their building, heading for the southern tip of Manhattan, joining throngs of panicked runners. Christina chronicles it all in Out of the Shadow of 9/11.
Some people were bloodied, other people were in pajamas, just like myself.
She describes how in Battery Park at Manhattan's tip, chaos reigned, especially with the booming sound of the first tower collapsing.
People in Battery Park had a good reason to panic because the Twin Towers were both wider and taller than this present tower, and if they had fallen over rather than collapsed, they could have reached all the way to Battery Park and crushed people by the thousands.
Then choking smoke billowed out from Ground Zero and coated them all in yellow, sticky grime.
Everybody was caught up in the smoke and were, I'm sure, worried they were going to be asphyxiated. Everybody's running around, screeching and bumping into each other and catapulting over things. And I just remember looking at Brian saying, are we going to die?
Quickly hiding behind this War of 1812 fort, the Christian couple said goodbye to each other and began to pray. That's when it hit Christina how shallow her walk with God had been.
Lord, I'm sorry that I have not put you first in my life because I hadn't. He was always, was a Sunday Christian.
All around them, people began screaming at vessels passing by and jumping into the water, and the vessels came.
This ended up being the largest boat evacuation in history. Boats picked up 500,000 people from Manhattan that day.
That included the Stantons, who spent many days with friends before being allowed back into their apartment, where the terrace doors had remained wide open facing Ground Zero.
And it was this huge, full-on trash receptacle. Everything was covered with about 6 inches of yellow dust. There were papers everywhere.
Area residents and workers were told this omnipresent dust was safe, but it turned out to contain some 2,000 toxins.
It was, quote-unquote, toxic soup. There's everything from pulverized concrete to jet fuel to asbestos. There were human remains.
The city rebuilt this area, but Christina and Brian, like many other New Yorkers, were out of work, unsure how to move forward, suffering from that poison and post-traumatic stress.
We ended up going to counseling over it for actually several years.
Yet out of all this darkness around Ground Zero came a guiding light.
The terrorists were shouting God is great as they crashed into the Twin Towers, but what they were really doing was a horrific act for Satan. But still, even in that horror, God was able to bring good.
For the Stantons, having stared death in the face where the towers once stood, they now realized they wanted a real relationship with the God of life and were totally dependent on him for their future. They repented.
I'd let Jesus out of a box on a Sunday, and I'd go back to my life on the weekdays. It was just the realization that I've been living my life really without God.
In her book, Christina tells how God then moved to set their future. It started with Christina reaching out to Reverend Tim Keller's famous Redeemer Presbyterian.
I went to the church, and they covered some bills for us, and we started attending there. Not too long after, I got a job there at the church planting center, and then my husband got a job there.
He's become Redeemer's chief financial officer, while Christina takes mission teams from Redeemer to minister all over the world. They saw and felt suffering during and after the attacks on this ground where the towers fell, and God's not letting that personal experience go to waste.
Our whole lives are changed because of 9/11. It certainly deepened our relationship with Christ. The only thing that matters now is glorifying God and to help others in a hurting world.
Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Ground Zero in New York City.
Coming up, New Orleans Saints quarterback Drew Brees takes a hit, but it's not the kind this NFL pro takes on the field. It has everything to do with the culture war in America and the Bible.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News.
Drew Brees, the quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, is getting pushback for doing a promo with Focus on the Family to promote Bring Your Bible to School Day. Take a look at this video.
Hey guys, Drew Brees here. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is 2 Corinthians 5:7. For we live by faith, not by sight. So I want to encourage you to live out your faith on Bring Your Bible to School Day and share God's love with friends. You're not alone.
So left-leaning organizations and media outlets are bashing him for working with Focus on the Family because of its conservative views, labeling the group as anti-LGBTQ because of its support for traditional marriage. Bring Your Bible to School Day is October 3rd. And that is it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. Remember that you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. And also tell us what you think about the stories that you've been seeing here by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope that you will join us next time. Have a great day.